My presentation is actually really, it lines up well with Andy because I'm post fellowships, so I've been doing TNR for a few years now, so Andy will see what the calendar looks like for a true teaching and research academic. And so I've set my presentation up to be basically the months, so the library can have an idea of really what the deadlines are for us, and slightly different to what's happening in ASK. Our deadlines for grants have moved forward, so we've got to get our first pages, as you'll see, in September now. So then we've got to get the first draft together by December. And the idea of that is it provides critical feedback so you can go out to our colleagues, and then by January, February, where you're really burrowing down, you've actually got the critical feedback, the scope of your applications, and then you know you're heading in the right path. So this is sort of a life cycle that I drew up for a true TNR academic. You know, obviously we've seen Andy present. Grant writing really goes through, you know, the summer period, there's no doubt. Teaching both semesters, manuscript writing when you can find times, and there's a little bit of strategy there with manuscript writing that I'll point out. Grant reviewing, so there's a lot of peer review, and the library plays a massive role there because we need to look at what people are claiming. So we need to download their publications and have a look at even their popular press articles to see whether they're telling the truth. Exam marking, and then obviously teaching prep is sort of part of the cycle. But it's not necessary in that order, by the way. If we start with a brief CV, so I studied at the University of Melbourne, a Bachelor of Science, did honours in biochemistry, so I'm a molecular scientist, and my focus is more on molecular aspects of health and disease. So I worked on a protein called Palapa Protein E, which is found in all of us. If you're unfortunate enough to develop or inherit the epsilon 4 allele from both mum and dad, which has one amino acid difference to the common form, you've got a greater than 95% chance of developing late-onset Alzheimer's disease. And we still don't understand why. It's just one amino acid difference, cysteine to an arginine. So part of the aspects of my research even now is looking at the proteomics of that phenomenon. But I'm also an enzymologist and a protein chemist working on new herbicide development, hence the reason why I asked Avril about confidentiality embargo, because we have work that's published in theses that is now subject to commercialisation. Well, the process where we're putting together partnerships, collaborative research agreements with large agrochemical companies, but also going into public health now. Because the target that I work on is an enzyme that's essential to both bacteria and plants. And so we have aspects of antibiotic discovery and also herbicide discovery. So I went through the ranks at Melbourne as a teacher. I started off really teaching and did research part-time. So senior tutor. By 2005 I was awarded an Australian postdoctoral fellowship, which is known now as a DECRA, and that was a sole APD, so I was the only sole investigator on that. But that was a 4-year fellowship, so I was still involved in teaching. And then I was an inaugural ARC Future Fellow, so Andy's coming off his fellowship now. I came off mine back in 2013, so I delayed 6 months and came off, so I've been essentially teaching and research for the last 3 years. I moved to La Trobe, and then I was thinking about the Future Fellowship. The first 2 years you do it, you're administering an institution, but then you could migrate it. So the last 2 years of the 4-year fellowship, I migrated to La Trobe. And the idea was the wonderful building that's behind us, La Trobe Institute of Molecular Science, required some of my skills in protein interaction and proteomics. So I set up a facility, and you can see down the bottom, last year I was awarded a grant, basically one of the 4 research platforms that have been funded by the DVCR's office, and this is known as the Comprehensive Proteomics Platform. So that serves the whole university and all our collaborative partners and industry partners in gas phase, mass spectrometry, something we can talk about later too in terms of looking at carbon dating, etc., and looking at mass profiles. Structural biology, so we determine 3-dimensional structures of enzymes and protein targets using the synchrotron. We use the macromolecular crystallography beamline and the SATS-WAX beamline, because you're using the imaging beamlines, the fluorescence beamlines. Yeah, so we're still putting in bids for the synchrotron, you know, as Andy is, and also ANSTO. We're doing some neutron scattering with ANSTO as well. So very similar, even though we're across colleges in terms of applying for beam time, very important beam time to our research. So I'll start with January, and this is what it looks like for a true TNR academic. So we're really, priority 1 in January is grant writing. And we write for both ARC and NHMRC, because a lot of our research at LIMS is focused on health initiatives. So we're trying to toggle both schemes. Very different, some similarities. I find that ARC grants are easier to write than in HMRC. In HMRC, the rule of thumb there is you pretty much have to have 80% of your grant completed to get your funding. It's crazy, but you need to show a significant amount of preliminary data to get your grant. Pretty much have 80% of it done. ARC, you want an iceberg. You don't want to show how much you've done, you just want to show the tip of the iceberg. You might have a lot more preliminary data underneath that you can't see, but you don't want to give away that you've already completed your grant. So two different schemes for that reason. Priority 2 is manuscript preparation and submission. So one of the things that I've noticed is, and you'll see that come November now, November 30th, we're trying to submit manuscripts to get those potentially 2016 dates for our publications. However, I find that can be counterproductive because as an associate editor, I'm sure Andy's an associate editor of journals too, we get a massive influx of manuscript submissions in late November, December. And sometimes it comes down to you get 5 papers a day and you've got to reject 4 of them. And everyone's trying to get those papers published before the year's end. I find the better strategy is to go January. So you submit January, a lot of people aren't necessarily submitting then because they're on holidays or break, and you tend to get more lenient reviews and tends to get you go through the cycle. So there's a bit of a shift there for everyone to realise. So I'm moving now towards a January submission. But I'm doing the work now, I'm writing all the manuscripts now, ready to submit come January 3, submit. And it worked well this year for me, where we got a relatively high impact paper by submitting 1st of January essentially. The other thing that's important for us in molecular science is we're looking at going to a local conference in Lorne. And I was on the committee for many years for the Lorne Conference on Protein Structure and Function, which is the oldest protein structure and function meeting in the world. And this is a great time for us, especially in Melbourne, in Australia, and just down the road really, where we get Nobel laureates speaking. This is how famous this meeting is worldwide. So a lot of our January time is also spent conference organising. And there are these aspects that we need to, need library support for that. So just to note, big meetings that come in late Jan, early Feb, pretty much happening down the road here at Lorne. If you move to February, you're sort of polishing off your grants, putting your budgets together by this stage. You should have the science pretty much done by then. And then you're moving into, and Andy will find out this in Feb, that you're moving into preparing for semester 1 teaching. The first year is the hardest year when you're preparing everything. And then once you roll into a process where you're just updating your lectures, it's a lot easier to manage. Moving into March, we start our teaching, so I start teaching in March, but the other thing, and Andy highlighted this too, is that you're actually commencing a lot of honours, masters and PhD students in March. There's a lot of activity in our labs where we're inducting research students in March, and you spend a lot of time showing what button to push. And don't push this one because you'll break that instrument. And then Andy and I are sitting there trying to work out how to fix it. So training is it happens every day. So even though you can see it's pictured in March, really from March right through to November, we're intense in research training. And that's at the PhD, honours and masters level. In April, now that the exam deadlines are earlier, we're preparing our exams. Most of the time we haven't even started teaching. But we've got to get our exam questions done first. And then if we can find time, we're actually writing manuscripts as well. So we're trying to get something submitted before the middle of the year. So I try to use January as my submission time for papers, April my submission time for papers, April, May, and then November, October, November. So that tends to be the periods where it's quieter. We can actually get some papers written. Moving into May, we're really looking at teaching a lot. So I do a lot of teaching in May. But then what ends up happening, I'm sure Andy gets the same thing, you end up getting grant reviews, so peer reviews. So a lot of my May and June was reviewing ARC grants, reviewing NHMRC grants. I served on NHMRC panel for 4 years. That's where you have to score essentially 100 grants. So that literally is the pile that you get. And so there's deadlines associated with your spokesperson grants, the ones that you're assigned to write a report to, can be up to 20. So 10 is secondary, 10 is primary, and there are deadlines that really come into June. So the priority shifts in May from being the second priority in your grant review to number 1, because that's when the deadlines are due. Normally early June you have to get your reports into. Then of course you're then juggling your exam marking. So you come out of peer review, series of NHRC and ARC grants, and then you're going into undergraduate exam marking. So that's probably me in June, sitting there. Then you got your rejoinders, yes. That's good. And I haven't got that on there. So you spend a bit of time cursing your reviewers first when you get your rejoinder, when you get your feedback for your grants. And then, the next day it's not so bad, or the third day, and possibly a week later you go, no, it's not too bad at all. I can rebut this. So you are, tackling that rejoinder process as well in June, July. But then July, Andy mentioned that he goes obviously to South Africa, we'll go to China. We tend in molecular science, because all the big meetings in the northern hemisphere in their summer, July is a busy travel period for us in molecular science. So we're going to conferences in the US or Europe in their summer. So we try to set early July, sometimes late June, and our plan's really there. We need to put our talks together, we need to then go over, present. Our inboxes pile up, of course, because you're overseas that period. And then you come back from a wonderful conference inspired, and then you hit with preparation for semester 2. So good luck, Andy, with that too. It does happen. July is a very busy period.
That's why I've moved the field school to June.
Yeah.
It's normally around late July.
Yeah. So you'll find that if you're preparing for the first time, early July is going to be very busy on the teaching front. Moving on to August, we're teaching. So I coordinate a subject, which is a lab-based subject, an internship. Very busy. So the top students in biochemistry that come into labs in pairs, they do research projects that are, first of all, novel, and they're right at the cutting edge. So they're actually doing new labs. They're not just repeating work that's been done before. And really interestingly, some of the work that these students do as an intern gets published or gets formulated into publication later on. And as I mentioned earlier, our first pages now in LIMS are due pretty much late August, early September for our grants. So we've got to write our first page. And I'm sure Andy will agree with this. It takes a long time to formulate your idea. Sometimes you've got an idea that's fine, but I find the first page the hardest to write. It takes the longest. Once you've actually set out what your idea is and how you're going to achieve that, it tends to write itself thereafter. So that's why I think it's good to have it in August, and everyone should realise in the library now that our deadlines for first pages are August. There's a flurry of activity to get first pages and track records. So you've got to build your team as well. So you've got to be talking to all your international and your local investigators to have them on your grant and ask for track records. So there's a lot of communication going not just inside the university, but also to our collaborators outside. Solidifying the team, putting your first page together, and then you sort of can have a breather. So by September, I'm finishing off teaching, but what we're looking at there is honours theses and master's theses now. So our students, Andy's got a lot of students, so have I. I've got a similar number to Andy. And this year, for example, I had 3 honours students and 3 master's students. I had 6 theses to help plan, to review and provide feedback. A lot of track changes, believe me, on Word documents. And then towards the end of September, being an avid Richmond fan, so unfortunately we don't get to see much finals action. If the library can help out with that, I'd really appreciate it. But I do try to take a short vacation in the school holidays in that sort of last week of September, leading into the AFL Grand Final. And that's a great chance to take a breath. Moving in October, what we're now looking at is a very busy examination period. So our honours and master students have to submit their theses. We have to read those theses. Then they have to present their work that gets assessed, and then they have to defend their theses. So that pretty much the whole of October is focused on honours and master students' theses or their dissertations. In between, we're finding time to do some manuscript writing and maybe even to continue our grant drafting. That's a bit of a wish list that becomes priority 3, unfortunately.
International PhD student apps application for that one.
Yes.
Which I always forget about because they're different to the rest of it. Always forget that.
September 30 is the deadline for international scholarship applications. October 31 is the deadline on the graduate research coordinator, so I know there's deadlines. So September, we're trying to get all international students to submit their applications for PhD scholarship in Cambridgeshire. October 31 is the deadline for locals. So what Andy and I are doing, we're putting together 300-word summaries, which are 1-page project descriptions for our students that are applying. And that's busy, because you have to talk to the student, formulate the project and customise it for them, and then submit that as part of their application. So that's sort of part of the process. We move into November, we're exam marking, and then what I've done the last month, do a lot of manuscript writing. So I'm trying to get all those manuscripts ready to submit. I try to submit 1 or 2 of them, potentially by the end of the month, to try to get them in 2016. If you're not having a good year, you try to do that. I've had a wonderful year this year in publication, so I'm going to hold off a lot of these till January and play that system that I've actually learned. And then if you've got time, you're also grant writing. And then by December, you're grant writing, but then family, don't tell my family this, they're priority number 2. I'm an avid fisherman, I'm a yaki, so I've got a Hobie craft, you can see it pictured there, and we get out into Port Phillip Bay and catch a lot of squid and a lot of snook and flathead and snapper, so I very much like my fishing. So I might be able to do that for 2 weeks. That's enough. And then, there's a lot of text here, but these are all the things that Andy touched on anyway. So these are priorities every month. So we're training students. We're discussing results with students and staff, and this could be weekly. I have a lab meeting every Friday as an institution. The speaker caters for the lab meeting. It's an hour and a half, and they have to present a PowerPoint presentation on their data, and then we discuss it. And often they're presenting sort of an idea of a paper or a chapter of their thesis. We have many meetings to deal with. When Andy gets into the T&R world and takes over the head of the department, he'll be chairing all of these meetings, but there's high degree research meetings that I'm on. There's research committee meetings, executive committee meetings, and they're every Thursday. So every Thursday I have an executive or a LIMS meeting. There's management of staff, so as director of the comprehensive proteomics platform, I'm managing a lot of staff, a lot of technical staff. There's manuscript reviewing, so don't forget the peer review. And as an associate editor, I'm sending off a lot of manuscripts for review, and they have to manage that process. That happens every month. Drafting, invention disclosures, provisional patents, this happens sporadically, but there's been a lot of activity in my lab recently, and so that's why I raised that issue before about embargo thesis, because it's just fresh in my mind, and we're in the process of ensuring that our provisional patents are watertight and nothing is leaked. And if it gets challenged and there's demonstration that's leaked, there goes my license or my potential commercialisation. And these companies are very shrewd. They will do their own research as well. They'll even send people into our library to check that thesis wasn't on the shelf. There's meeting with clients of their platform, collaborators and industry representatives, as Andy mentioned, so that goes on throughout the year. Then there's experiments. Very similar to Andy, my students get shocked when they see me in the lab, but I love bench time. Occasionally I get in there and actually do experiments for collaborators, or they might be also for industry. And because my expertise in proteomics and interactions, it's in high demand out there. Then there's management of instrument and equipment programs, like Andy. I'm the senior technician, really the director of the platform, but I've got to manage these because a lot of our technicians don't necessarily know how to do this. So it's a process where you've got to look at, diagnose. It can take a day out of your life just to diagnose what the problem is. Then there's marking and feedback and continuous assessment tasks, not just exams, test reports, probes, etc. Organisation of conferences, very big part. So we're on committees for meetings around, it could be international. So last year I chaired the International Conference on Analytical Ultracentrifugation, which is a technique that I'm an expert in, just at LIMS here. We have people from all over the world come to La Trobe. And so I'm hoping to see more activity where La Trobe can host these international meetings. We've got the resources now, we've got wonderful lecture halls, wonderful workshop rooms, and we've also got catering now that's really, really nice. What we challenge with is accommodation. We use La Trobe apartments, and we also use the colleges for that meeting. There's rumours, talking to Merrill Anderson on University Council, that there might be a hotel built here, and a wine bar, that sort of thing, which would be conducive to their hosting more and putting La Trobe on the map internationally. And then finally, I do a lot of this for all the students that Andy and I supervise, and all the ones that we mentor on RPPs and what have you, you've got to write a reference form. So you're forever, and your staff too, you're forever writing references for students to support their job applications, to support their award applications. And so that's an ongoing process too. So that gives you really a life cycle, sort of in the research calendar. You've seen the calendar there, it gives you an idea of how the deadlines differ between the two colleges really. So we're moving our grant deadlines earlier now. And that's probably good for managing, because if ASCA stay in that January-February period,
Well, the ASC doesn't, I mean, you know, that January-February period is the reality of when it actually gets written. It's not the reality of when they're asking for things. But, I mean, it would have been last month, I think, or maybe earlier this month, that one, so that is, again, it's moving early.
Yep, I'll leave it there. So thank you. Thanks for your invitation.
I'm really tired having listened to you here. Does anybody have any questions about what I Where do you start?
You actually remember your children's names?
Well, I do get confused sometimes with two boys on the cricket field when they're wearing whites. I must admit that. Yeah, I mean, it's Outlook. The Outlook calendars are the godsend. If it wasn't for Outlook, I wouldn't know where I'm going.
So I miss meetings. I tell people all the time, if it's not my Outlook calendar, don't turn up because I'll forget because I'll do so many other things.
15-minute warning is great.
And same to students. It's like, oh, we didn't have that meeting. Well, did you say that?
I think on that note, it's actually very important because academics are very extremely busy. We often get an email to say, are you available on this time? But our calendars are up to date. So you can actually go into Matt Perrigan's calendar, you can see when I'm free.
Yeah.
And the best way to do it, if you ever want to get an academic to come to something, look at their calendar first, see where they're open, and send them the invitation there. But give them an option as well, whether there's another opening in the calendar, maybe the next day. So give them one or two, because sometimes we don't necessarily put it into a meeting, it's a regular thing where we're meeting with a student one-on-one, and it's locked down for 11 o'clock every Tuesday. I won't necessarily put that in my Outlook. So it's just a little thing that really helps us, that if you send a calendar invite and give us an option, we'll accept it or deny it, but it's great to have that rather than sit there to and fro trying to work out a time when we're all available.
I think one thing missing from mine is actually the number of things like this that I do. I think that's happened because I'm a research-only academic. So someone asks a variety of people, and I'm always not get suggested. So I end up doing an awful lot of talks or feedback, like I did, like beta testing for the finance programs and all this sort of stuff, which is a ton of work, which never really gets sort of particularly recognised. And again, that's something that next year with all this other stuff, I'm probably just going to have to say, sorry, I don't have time for it. I've put an awful lot of investment into all that, but
Yeah, research over times, in hindsight, I'm going to apply for another fellowship because you certainly, I mean, you've essentially got, the way I see teaching and research academic, you've got three jobs. You're doing your research, you're doing your teaching, but you're doing a lot of administration. I put, giving talks at forums and events as part of administration, but that's the way I see an academic. And even our VC says that there's no harder working professional in the world than an academic. He says that time and time again.
And our DVCR says there's no such thing as a research-only academic. Direct words.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Eva.
So I'm going to put a question for each of you. So the library's involved in a whole bunch of online and print things. So for instance, we have collections of journals which you say you use. We help people in the learning and teaching area for reading lists. The team here that you see in front of you, our role is only to help academics and HDR students. So we do research attention in your metrics kinds of reports. We help in ERA and publications data collection. Andrew over there works in research data management, a new kind of area that we're getting into. So if you just reflect on that, if you could say the three most important things that the library could do to help you, just quick it off the cuff.
Number one, teach research students how to write. No, I mean seriously, that's that is funnily enough like my biggest problem. Is that I mean it's the one thing I've sort of, because I don't teach at undergrad, and then so I've started sort of I had to sort of work to get that cohort of students because I'm not stood in front of them all of the time, and the field school was one way of doing that. And I've run a lot of reading course subjects, and my sort of realisation when I actually got the first essays from a lot of them was actually a bit of shock that a third-year student couldn't even structure a sentence. I mean, there was one the other day, and I sort of said, I just turned around and I said, look, if you want to do honours, this is going to have to get fixed, and I can only do so much. So I'm focusing on the language, I'm not focusing on the content. I can't even get to it, and I said that I know that you guys do writing, and so I gave him all the various links and said, right, you need to go and see these guys and work on that. Because it just otherwise you spend your entire life trying to solve that problem.
Okay.
That's certainly a major one. As far as my metrics go, my own personal metrics, I know them. I mean, as a research academic who's writing grants all the time, I sort of know I regularly keep it updated. I personally, I have a website where I actually have all of my papers. It's got a password on it, so if anyone wants a password, they can get it, download my PDFs. So I'm pretty on the ball with that stuff. I sort of know. Because it's useful for me. If I'm overseas in South Africa and I want one of my papers, I go to my own website and just click it up. I have a copy of it on a hard drive somewhere, or if I need to show it to someone. Certainly we've had discussions about data management. That's a big thing because one of the legacies of being a research-only academic for many years, moving between different institutions and different departments, is I have 20 years of data scattered on hard drives everywhere. That I could probably sit down and spend an entire year uploading that to my research server, and then probably another year trying to sort it out into a meaningful thing, because you're overseas in South Africa, back up your data. Back up that data, you back up your data again. You move, you're in China, you do that, you back up your data, you come back, you back it up to here. You've got this, I've changed the computer, I'm on a different computer now, that gets backed up, this gets backed up, I move institutions. I have so many backups of data, that one of my biggest problems is with all these different projects and things going on, it can take me a long time to get back into a project because I just know that my data management history is, if somebody suddenly says, hey, that thing you did 5 years ago, it's like, oh Christ. Where is that? That's something I'm really trying to get, with regard to stuff that's being generated now out of the lab, trying to get that sort of, but then things like VisLab 2, for example, my students can't, it seems that my students, there's a way that you're meant to be able to log that onto the servers. So it can be saved off the servers, but it doesn't work for students. And the students are the ones in there working, which then means it has to get saved onto a hard drive, physically moved into my lab, and then saved back onto a research center there, which need me to sort of do it. There's a lot of glitches to those mechanisms. And it was brought up the other day, equally, that's a facility that everyone uses, and that, without that facility, all that data is just sat on the C drive. So there is an issue of data, anyone could go in and utilize it. And I do know that people have gone in and have used our data for doing presentations of what VisLab does, often without examples. But those things are slowly getting resolved, hopefully. Students had a right data management.
Well, for me, I'll give you a little acronym, CAT. So the first thing is compliance. So we talked about, for example, thesis and part of that. You can help us with compliance with those issues because we're very busy and it's often difficult for us. And obviously the industry engagement team, commercialisation team can do that as well. A for access, so access to journals, and it's great already. We've got a wonderful access network. But I'm still a member at University of Melbourne, and theirs is broader. I still use theirs. because I can access more journals with them.
University of Liverpool in England.
Yeah, there you go.
Some idea of physics stuff.
There you go. So, but we can tap into that. If you clear enough, we can tap into that. And the last thing is training. So, Andy already talked about training. You do this already. Annual training courses for students. If you can help us with the basic training of research students, how to reference using email, maybe how to proofread, these sort of basic things. It's up to us to put the science together in many ways and help them with that. But if you can help with formatting and that training aspect, to me, CAT, the three things are the priorities for really the workflow of the library.
Thank you very much. And at the risk of adding something else to your Outlook calendar, Andrew is going to contact you, Andy, or maybe Charlie will, about your research data, or maybe Clayton. So just expect your Outlook calendar next year to have another appointment.
Sure.
And,
No worries.
and Matt, I'm going to get you to talk to Arlene about things that you need that we don't have. So Arlene's going to stick something in your Outlook calendar. Arlene also.
So that one of journal access is a sort of funny one because, I mean, mostly I come up against it because, again, I'm in an arts faculty and I'm doing archaeology, but, I review for nearly 30 different journals that can vary from strict geophysics journals to mineralogy to archaeology to all types of things. And one of the problems here is, I suppose, that I naturally, mostly the people that do what I do, live in earth science departments, which is a degree which we don't have here. And thus I do butt up against that sometimes because, I'm probably the only person at the university that would ever access those types of things. So.
Let's not prejudge. Let Arlene
Excellent.
tuck it under her hat. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.